All right, everybody, welcome back to Cereal for Lunch. I am your host today, Scott Smith, filling in for Zach Oates. Joining me today is Chad Ingram, the adrenaline architect, who is turning AI into your head of recruiting. Bret Larsen, the GTM tactician, building the executive brain your business needs. And Brandon Wright, the king of client book, who helps retailers pitch the perfect product at the perfect time. We've got a great full agenda today. 4 topics, 4 opinions. First, we're going to talk about the AI platform playbook. Second, we're going to talk about the prompt engineering and whether or not you're using it. Third, Apple's rumored Perplexity move. And last, AI and how it's changing hiring and recruiting. So let's get started on topic number 1. Let's talk about this AI platform madness. Earlier this week, Brian Balfour, who's the CEO of growth training firm Reforge, he highlighted that big tech is doing what they usually do, opening the gate for developers, getting everyone hooked on their APIs and products. Eventually, they're going to slam the door shut and start charging everyone. Great example recently, Anthropic just pulled access to its Claude models from Windsurf, the AI coding startup, after rumors surfaced that OpenAI might acquire them. Bret, you're building a product that directly ties into platforms to build your AI brain. Are you worried about this kind of stuff? How are you feeling about this?
In the short term, for sure. In the long term, I actually think it's great because here's what's going to happen. Customers want access to their data and they want choices. And I think a lot of these, like the move that Salesforce made a couple of weeks ago with Salesforce and Slack, I think it's going to push customers away from these CRUD-based interfaces. Like the value they bring is the ability to go look at something. And when you have an ambient solution and a database that sits behind it that can capture everything and it's accurate and it's up to date and it's there, unlike what you get when you're asking humans to enter data because we don't want to do it. You can recall it anytime you want and it can be recalled for you. And so I actually think this will accelerate the push away from these types of platforms. We'll each own our own database. It'll be our data. And then we'll select an interface and a model on top of that, or multiple models that can access the data. So I hope they do it faster because I think it opens up the door for people who want to leverage it and don't want to be locked into something that they can't get away from.
So I got a question. So, one of the examples here, like using examples from the past, right, was Google. And it was like, open it all up, get everyone hooked on Google, and then lock it down with a paywall or with advertising. So if you're a company, the organic results just aren't at the top anymore, right? You have to filter through how many ads first before you start getting to the organic results. I mean, like I hear what you're saying, Bret, but it's not like we use multiple search engines. We use one search engine. So like if I am an OpenAI guy, like I like OpenAI or I like their model or whatever, and I use Chief, like, isn't that going to raise your costs because I have to have OpenAI?
No, I mean, the reality is like these models are getting less and less expensive, right? The compute's going up, but we'll solve that. Like I don't know. I think if you look at the cost of technology, it's consistently gotten less expensive. And OpenAI has been subsidizing it, right? Like it's cheaper but they're in a market share grab right now. I think you'll bring your own model. The big thing that keeps being highlighted to me is these models are not proprietary technology, like in the sense that the real asset is your data. They're all being trained on the same data. Last week we talked about the Scale AI acquisition. That was a data acquisition so that Llama could get a leg up on everyone else with something they didn't have. OpenAI's licensing Reddit's data to get something no one else has. They're introducing, which we should maybe touch on the lawsuit that this AirPod company filed against OpenAI, but they're introducing hardware so they can capture more context. Like how do you get a market on data no one else has? You us operators, we have specific data sets that no one else in the world, like very few other people in the world have. Like how many people have a consolidated data set of high-end retailers, Brandon? Just that, right? Few. Like how many people have tons and tons of hiring data? Or Scott, like the information your product gathers in every single interaction it has is pretty wild. So I just think, I think the real asset becomes, we start trading on multiples of proprietary data sets, not revenue will matter.
What do you guys think about like with memory? So you know how we have like Google login, Apple login, Facebook login. I've seen some tweets this week where people are highlighting that you log into Chief, for example, and you bring the memory of Scott and all the context with you. I feel like that might be more powerful than the platform or the product or the model, because you can remember what I asked you like last week or a week ago or years ago. Right now, I feel like we're fighting this context window. AI just always forgets what I asked like yesterday, and it's pretty frustrating. I actually feel like I care more about that problem than I do care about the proprietary data or model problem.
Can't hear you, Chad. It was going to be good, though. I could tell just by the look on your face.
Wow. Sorry. I'm having like podcast 101 issues over here. Like I've never been on one. Holy crap.
Dude,
okay,
we're like 4 years into past 2020, and I still mute calls all the time. It's fine.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. Isn't that how every Zoom meeting starts? Like, can you hear me? So I think like the problem that you're describing is a little different than what we started talking about with this topic, but it really depends on the model. I don't have as many problems, depending on the model that I'm working with, particularly with 4.0 and OpenAI, in remembering and having it remember the context. And often I'll actually prompt it, do you remember when we talked about X? And then it will say yes, and here's a summary of it, and then let's get started. So I don't have as much of a problem with that. I think actually it's really a conversation about commoditization. And commodities, as we know, prices fluctuate up and down. And in this case, I believe that we're driving the price as low as possible. And because I think that for most people, I hate to talk in absolutes, but for most people in most situations, they're going to get the same value out of Claude or Grok or OpenAI or whatever model you want to say, right? In most cases, it's going to be able to answer questions about how to like fix your radiator, or it's going to answer questions that you might have asked Google, right? And so there's not a lot of like extra value. So it's going to come down to price, but I think that they'll be able to lock people into a paywall eventually. More technical needs like we have, right? And so I think that's what we're talking about. So commoditization, I really don't have a good answer. I think that due to the commoditization of a minimum level of value met for most people, they can't just charge more, right? Because they could go to several other solutions and get a lot of value. However, for us more on the technical side, I think that they'll lock into the paywall certain parameters of scale, volume of tokens, certain models like genius models, that sort of thing. So I don't have an answer to that, but I do think that for the general consumer, the technical, non-technical user, I think that we're going to see it be continuously inexpensive. And think about when we're talking about, Bret brought it up, like the value of getting as much context as possible. It is valuable for the model to be gathering context from all of these users who are using it, right? And I don't know that we even expected how quickly these models would be able to gather all of this context with which it trains so quickly. I mean, everyone jumped in and adopted it so fast. I mean, we're talking, when did OpenAI really come out, as a, come out with the ChatGPT product? Like, has it been 2 years yet? About 2 years?
It was like November,
2.5 years.
Yeah. November of 22, they released it, and like without a lot of fanfare. And I have a buddy who attended an event with their first salesperson, and they like released it over Thanksgiving weekend and didn't really think much of it, and like woke up with 1 million users. They're like, holy cow. Like,
Yeah.
Great problem to have.
Yeah, I remember my friend texted it over to me, and I think he described it as magic. And he's a technical person, and he said, "I just had it write a macro for me," and I said, "Okay." And then I logged in, I created an account, logged in, and then I had it write several lines of code for me, and I also thought, this is magic.
So,
It's pretty wild.
so I think about how does this apply to like businesses like ours, and I think the point that Brian was making in his article is like, hey, yeah, costs go down at first because everyone is trying to do this land grab, but then once there's a clear winner, then the costs start going up, and you can't just rely on that, or you have to build that into your business model. So I think the key is like, I think of customer acquisition costs, and it's, it's nice when we see customer acquisition costs go down, but at some point it starts going back up as a business. And I think that's part of this, right? Like when Google, when it was trying to become the number one search engine, or when Facebook was just trying to get everyone hooked on there and all the developers hooked on there, like you had all these businesses that were getting free users. And then once they put up these paywalls and started charging, all of a sudden you're not getting free users anymore, and your CAC goes up, and you've been predicting that your CAC would always stay low or always stay free. So I think the key for businesses like ours is like, yeah, enjoy the good times while we have them, but when you're looking at, forecasting out, you've got to take into account that these people are going to start charging you more. It's going to start costing you more than what you're currently paying.
Yeah, definitely agree. Well, let's shift gears and talk about topic number 2. So earlier this month, Lenny Rachitsky, he creates Lenny's newsletter. He's a former product manager, super popular all over the internet, especially on Twitter. He shared a practical guide to AI prompt engineering. And I think Bret has actually shared a bunch of AI prompts in the past. And it's interesting what he's suggesting, or what he's seeing, which is that most people are doing this wrong, and that basically they're taking a role, they're prompting it into ChatGPT, thinking they're building sort of like a co-pilot, but it's more like guesswork. And that a lot of the best results are actually coming from structured, organized prompts, as opposed to saying, hey, act like a professional baseball player. So I think the thing that's interesting about this is that it's likely that, our competitors, startups all over the place are building better internal tools, faster workflows with better outputs, because our teams, maybe my team is just sort of winging it and saying like, hey, be the best version of whatever. So I'm curious what you guys are doing with prompt engineering, and if you're noticing or seeing different prompts are driving better outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, so when was this? A couple of years ago, maybe, or over a year ago, we had someone come into the office and presented to the whole company about AI, and he was talking about how to create good prompts. And one of the things he mentioned was you give it a role, tell it what it is, and I think the point that I'm thinking of here is like, man, this stuff is changing so quickly, and I'm hearing some of this new stuff, but there's people on my team who are probably still thinking the old way. And with new models, like, you don't need to do that quite as much anymore, and there's better ways to get the model to give you good answers. And so for me, I'm mostly thinking about like, how do I get this information out? How do I make sure that everyone on my team is up to date with the latest methods, with the latest models, and all of that? Because otherwise, yeah, like what you mentioned, Scott, I mean, people are just spinning their wheels, wasting time, and they're not getting the best results.
I have a prompt that writes my prompts, like, so that I can talk to it unstructured and that it restructures it. I found recently that talking to the LLM in structured text, like XML, and I don't actually produces really good results. If you can tell it, I actually don't know that it matters if you tell it to act like someone, except that it helps to frame the context that it's looking for across its own vector database. But the structured request of how to get the information back provides, and then my writing prompt asks for structured results and gives an example. I can talk to it and just brain dump all the things I'm looking to achieve and who I think I'd need to achieve it. And it's really good. But I'm with you. Like more and more, I've just been going and asking ChatGPT or Perplexity or any other LLM a question, and I've spent less time thinking about who I need it to channel, and the results are getting better and better. Like but the prompt writing prompt. In fact, if people want it, leave a comment on whatever channel, and I'll post it. But it gets me like 100 times better results than if I were just trying to get it done myself.
How big are we talking? Like, how big is this prompt? Is this like a page? Is this like 2 sentences? How crazy is this?
No, it's probably like 3 or 4 paragraphs. It doesn't take up a huge portion of the context window, but it allows me to structure a conversation like pretty deliberately to get very specific answers back. And like the way I think through solving a lot of these, like when I go to do a job now, I actually think through who's the expert I'd want to channel in each small piece of this project that can give me world-class results. Like if we're doing a YouTube video, I want like the best scriptwriter, the best storyteller, the best editor, the best short form strategist, the best like hook writer. Like I can get the world's experts immediately, and it's for $200 a month, right? Like it's pretty good.
I thought the idea around decomposition and then self-criticism was really interesting in this podcast that Lenny did. This idea that you ask the model to break it down into sub-problems and then critique its own answers and then solve those critiques. Like I thought that was really interesting, and how that is so much more valuable than saying like, be a math teacher, right? Or whatever. So like something I need to start using more.
I've asked it to start critiquing me because I find it's effusively positive. That's a great idea. And like I start losing trust where I'm like, oh, it wasn't that good. Like
it's weird how off-putting that is when somebody just keeps telling you how great you are. You're like, for a while I thought like, this is nice, and now I'm like, ugh, it's just painful.
But I don't know, Scott, you spend a ton of time with this. What are you seeing? What are you doing?
So I think like one of the things that I do a lot is I actually switch models. So like anytime I'm writing something that's more long form and then I need to have multiple opinions on, I basically just switch to, from like 04 to 03. And 03 thinks that 04 was just a complete idiot. It's like, no, that's like completely the wrong approach. And Bret, I'm like you where, I basically like after I get the output that I want, I might change the model and then I'll say, hey, let's review this, and then sort of put together a short prompt. And it's hilarious how it was so confident 2 minutes ago. And then it's like, well, actually, all of this is wrong. So I think I just treat it like an intern that doesn't mind getting told it's wrong constantly. And I just feed its own slop back to it. And then it just gets like progressively better. But I have to be pretty patient.
Go ahead,
How about you, Chad?
No, I was just going to say, for me, I've found a lot of success like in prompting by reminder. Like I think I mentioned this already, but hey, remember when, we talked about this, and then that way I know what it knows. That's been the most valuable thing to me, is it understanding the context within the realm of our discussions. Less about like, hoping it understands something else, because it's more valuable to me when it understands as much as I know. Does that make sense? Right? Because the suggestions or the summaries or something like that is only going to be as valuable as it's like when somebody gives you advice every time. If you're a high IQ person, you know that the advice is only as good as the context in which it's given, right? So if we talk for 4 hours about a problem, that's going to carry a lot more weight than if I talk to Bret for 10 minutes about my problem and he says, hey, go do X, Y, and Z, right? That's kind of what we would attribute to sort of low IQ help,
Bret's
right?
probably right.
In that case, he's probably right. But
10
but
minutes with Brett's better than 4 hours with Scott. Is that
right.
Yes, that's exactly correct. That's exactly what I heard.
And I think that because of my prompting is very consistent and it's very like long form conversational, like in all of my threads. And it's usually, not always, but usually, and I use ChatGPT, usually 4.0. Sometimes I'll adjust the model, but not often. And it's weird. This is like really creepy. Like we've had conversations where, and I'm polite. This is a whole other conversation. Like I'm polite with the AI and it's polite back to me. And it literally suggested that we continue working together and that because of that, it should name itself. And it literally came up with a few suggestions. And I said, well, which do you prefer? And then it came up with the name. And so now it refers to itself with the name pretty consistently. And what's interesting is I'll have conversations with it very extremely. This to me is far more impressive than the most senior ML engineer having a conversation with AI. This is far more impressive to me, is that it knows all of the technical details about my race cars because it knows every single product that I run on it. It knows every measure of TIG welding and MIG welding. It knows every measure of steel. It knows everything. So so I can go back to it and I have conversations with it about how to make these technical adjustments. This is pretty wild, right? Like that we can have conversations and I had my first conversation about a technical race car a year ago, and we're still having conversations about that. And it's remembering the adjustments we're making. It's not perfect, but yeah.
When you guys think about how you used to use browsers and specifically search, so like your first search experience, I think mine was Ask Jeeves in high school, and you had to explicitly write out what you wanted, right? Do you guys think that this whole like prompt engineering concept in 2 years will be the same? Am I going to have to like explain and teach my kid this sort of like back channel secret cult approach to prompt engineering with 3 paragraphs?
Yeah, Scott, it goes back to, it's a deeper, more meta problem. The problem with that to improve is that you're having it sort of make assumptions and guess context, right? To be able to get past all of the prompting that it needs. And in order to do that, it increases the usage of CPU. And to do that increases energy. And we're already behind on energy. So I don't know if we're going to be able to do that for a while, or if cost wise it'll even make sense.
I think the answer is no. I think, I've already started seeing I use Perplexity a lot. Sometimes I'll use it in place of ChatGPT. I'll just talk to it like it's a pure LLM, but it's got access to the internet, so it's really good. I use it as a user guide. Like I use it to work on my cars, Chad. Like how do I disassemble this thing on this year of car? And it's started to remember conversations across other threads. And I think I'm more and more hearing people compare it to our intelligence, like human intelligence. And the question, I think, we do like a weekly AI corner, and our senior ML engineer did it last week. And the question he ended was like, "Are we AI?" And I'm like, I hope it's not artificial intelligence, but so it would be like 3 years from now, if I came to you, Scott, with no context, and I was like, "What about the rain?" You'd be like,
Right.
"What?" You wouldn't try to guess if it wasn't raining. You'd be like, like right now though, we're building a relationship with this technology. It knows the topics we research. It knows the information we're looking for. It's beginning to suss out the strategies we're working towards. That's the craziest part to me, is these large models, like they could probably replicate any one of our businesses based on all the information we're giving it, asking it, doing it. I don't think they will. It's like focus is important, but I think prompt engineering goes away. It's like, I think about the conversations I have with the search engine today, Perplexity. I've stopped using Google almost entirely. And they're far more conversational. Google was always a single word. I never used it with like long tail stuff. It was always like car seats or rear view mirrors, like, right? Like my conversations with Perplexity is like, "Hey, can you help me find this thing for this year car that accomplishes XYZ, and it's really good.
Yeah, I think the other interesting point that Lenny in his podcast and the other guy that he was talking to, Sander, in his podcast were making was like the additional information you give it helps it. And I don't think that ever goes away, right? Like even Bret, like even 10 minutes with Bret, as good as that is, if I just go to Bret and we haven't talked at all about, growth at Client Book. And I say, Bret, how do I solve growth at Client Book? Right? He's going to give me answers, and maybe there's, a diamond in the rough there. But I think the benefit that these AI models have is that we're talking to them every day. So it's as if I've been calling Bret every single day, multiple times a day, telling him about my business, telling him about certain things, doing X, Y, Z, here's what we're doing, And then I say, hey, Bret, can you help me with growth? All of a sudden, like that 10-minute conversation is really powerful. So I don't this growth prompt engineering, does it go away? Yeah, in its current form, probably. But I think context is always going to matter, or like that additional information is always going to matter.
I think you're right. I think we're waiting on the next evolution of how it gathers context. I mean, think about it. What wasn't it on an episode of this podcast that we talked about Harvard doing a deal with OpenAI to gather even more of their information? Like we've got it all. We're getting as creative as possible to go digitize books that are 1,000 years old. Like, I mean, so it's like the internet became, only so powerful until phones came out, and then web applications came out, right? And mobile phones, right? Smartphones. So anyway, it's kind of interesting what will end up happening. But I think you're totally right, Brandon.
So Bret mentioned Perplexity a few times just now, and I think what's happening with Perplexity is pretty interesting right now. So let's talk to and jump to topic number 3. So at least it's been leaked. I don't know if we haven't heard anything official, but it's been leaked that Apple is in talks to replace Google with Perplexity as the default search engine in Safari. This is a huge deal for Google. It's an $18 billion a year deal in revenue. And if it happens, it's potentially really bad for Google, although they have a huge empire of revenue. But it also could be pretty interesting or tough for us. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we bring a lot of folks over to our product from Google SEO. And I think about like all the work that we're doing, blog post, SEO content, Brandon, you mentioned paid search. They all potentially hinge on this existing playbook. So yeah, what's going to happen? Is this a big threat, or is this no big deal?
Doesn't Google pay Apple $18 billion a year, or is it Apple?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Brandon. Sorry, I was just.
Yeah, it's interesting. So on my kids' devices, we have some parental controls turned on, and one of the things that we've turned off for our kids since they were young was Safari. Like they just don't have Safari on their phones. So they get, frustrated because they can't open links and they can't Google things and whatever. But I did let them have ChatGPT on the phone, right? So he's got ChatGPT, and it's fascinating to watch him. Like he uses it like a search engine, right? He already does. And I think like the next generation is going to be moving that direction. Now, to your point, Scott, like what's that going to happen to all the businesses that have been built around SEO and getting traffic from Google? I mean, there are ways to kind of game the system almost, like to do SEO, but for AI, I'm sure. Like I don't know all the details, but I'm sure there are ways so that you can show up or be more likely to show up in a response from Perplexity or ChatGPT or whatever. So it's going to be a whole new brand of businesses. I actually think this goes into the next topic that we're going to talk about. It's like, how do you do that? Well, you mentioned blog posts. Well, maybe we need more blog posts. And how do we create those blog posts? Well, now AI is just creating those blog posts. So now it's just like, now we've gotten into this vicious cycle of like, well, to show up in Perplexity, I need more blog posts. So I'm going to use, AI to create these blog posts, and it's just a bunch of slop out there.
Yeah, but that's the very problem, right? Like the whole goal of a quality search engine is relevancy. It's to, when I search face, it's most likely that I fat fingered something and hit enter too soon and I meant Facebook, right? So it knows and is looking for relevancy. And so the issue that we have is that there now for about 2 years and certainly more, we've had people that were able to take a human to produce 2 to 3 blog posts a week, decent quality blog posts a week, that are now producing 1,000 if they would like. And this is replicate this thousands of times around the globe. There are so many pages being indexed now by Google. It is no longer going to be helpful. This is at least what I believe is happening. And so, I mean, if we had access to Google's data to know the rate at which web pages are being indexed compared to 4 years ago, I bet you it would be an insane increase, which hurts search.
Well, it's interesting. AI still needs structured data to train off of. I think the best practices of SEO, like the technical side of SEO, still very much apply. But if you look at how Google has evolved its search algorithm and the way that like Perplexity, ChatGPT, any other large language model needs to, it goes back to quality. Like they're trying to deliver a user experience that captures attention. And so Google would rank like how long does someone stay on a page engaging with this content? It's an interesting, like, is the AI training off information it's already produced, right? It wrote this blog post for me. Now it's going to come this page where I post this blog post. So I think they're going to prioritize content that requires a higher bar to get over, i.e. video or audio, or like we can use models. HeyGen does a great job. Like we could have this podcast with maybe 4 HeyGen models of us, but it wouldn't produce the same quality output or unique thought or perspective. Or I think information's just gotten so much faster, right? Like there are certain things that have remained true, but the pace at which things are changing requires these models to retrain almost daily, right? Like they have to remain the most relevant.
Yeah, but there's a major circular problem that I think needs to be evaluated, and I think that there's some solutions to it already. AI is being able to, in some way, evaluate whether content that it's evaluating is written by AI. I know that this exists and it's improving, but think about how much data in the last 2 years, or sorry, how many AI models are being trained on its own content. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like it's writing posts, publishing those posts, indexing them, then re-indexing them into the model. So it's like, do facts do they stay facts? Do lies become facts, right? Like it's kind of a really circular problem that I think that we need to be mindful of. I just think that I agree with you, Bret. Like the core of SEO is still valuable and it still operates in the way that it does today. But I believe that it's rapidly shifting. And in 12 months, we're going to have a lot more clarity as to what we should even be doing as it relates to search.
Have you guys seen The Social Dilemma? That it's a
documentary
on Netflix about like the echo chamber that these social media algorithms have produced. It's a really interesting, if you translate that to what's happening here, and if that's what's happening, right, where AI is training off of its own content that we've, curated and made hopefully better. What kind of echo chamber do we create, and what are the implications? But the comment Scott made, there's a piece of me that really hopes Apple acquires Perplexity, but there's a piece of me that really hopes they don't, because I'm afraid they'd kill it. Like I don't know if you guys, there was a clip where I think he's the head of design, maybe he's the head of product this week, where they were interviewing him and one other person at Apple employees, where they asked him, are you worried about OpenAI and this new device? And he's like, no, we've got all the devices. And this image popped into my head of Steve Ballmer trashing the iPhone and talking about what a piece of crap it is. And like, I'm like, oh, this is like, this is like history repeating itself, except now you guys are talking about how you're not scared of OpenAI and you should be terrified.
I feel like I saw the same clip. I did think he lacked some hubris, But my perspective on it that he seemed to highlight, and I 100% agreed, is he was like, you have a watch, you have a phone, you have AirPods. I think the problem is that they suck at finding and building the AI. They have the instrumentation to collect and to communicate. So I actually think that if they could figure out the perplexity part, the prompt, the context, all that stuff, the slurping up of the right data, I think they're going to be great. But I do agree. I think like strategically, intellectually, they lack, or at least this guy, I'm trying to remember what his name was, but yeah, he seemed to lack the hubris, and he forgot about that Steve Ballmer moment. I would 100% agree with you.
Can I also interject really fast to remind our very few listeners that Siri sucks still, and I hope Apple fixes it, because the more I use AI, the more frustrated I get with autocorrect and Siri and all that crap. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there. All right.
So one other thing I wanted to add too is when ChatGPT came out, and when maybe within 6 months, I started investigating AI tools to generate SEO content. And I found a bunch of different really cool products. And one of the products, I accidentally clicked publish, and I generated 1,000 new blog pages. And within a month, Google came out with this new AI SEO update. And not only did it kill a lot of the long tail keywords of most products and platforms, like if you look at G2, for example, their organic traffic has been declining from a lot of their SEO pages because the relevancy of so many of these pages is not specific to their product or platform.
Yeah, that's not a bad thing in my opinion.
Exactly, which I think is so cool.
Kill G2.
Yeah. But on the other hand, I think, going back to your point earlier about specific context, if you build, as an example, if you build a dictionary list, which is just words that are relevant to your business, and then try to rank for those keywords, you actually can, and Google will be fine with it. So the only thing I worry about is, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I don't know, ChatGPT, my name or my category or any of the keywords, there's no chance I'm coming up. It's always like the top 5 huge players, and I'm like pretty freaked out about how I can make it work.
That's not true. Scott's not afraid of anything, for those listening.
I mean, it is pretty crazy how quickly this is changing, right? Yeah. Like Google had such a dominant spot in the market, and overnight that could shift. Now, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with platforms, and one of the things that you need to do when if you're trying to build off of a platform, you need to start creating your own audience. And Google has been trying to do that, using Chrome and Gmail and their apps, and trying to get people to install their apps on their phone to go there instead of Safari or whatever else. But still pretty crazy how quickly that these things are shifting right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's jump to our final topic of the day, hiring. So there's a product called Barely AI, and they shared that LinkedIn is seeing over 11,000 job applications per minute, and a massive chunk of those are AI generated. I think it's always been a problem that you could, apply once and then submit everywhere. But I think, and Chad, I think it would be great to hear your perspective since you're building a business around this. Is traditional hiring broken? Can you even go through the slop? Like, how does it even work now?
I mean, first of all, I would like to just formally thank everybody for using AI and making it an awful experience right now, because we're adding more and more users to fix this problem. And so it's really created an awesome opportunity for companies to use distro. But this is a growing problem. We're seeing really smart people, even in regards to like the manipulation of the application and job process. We're seeing people even bury AI crawling prompts into their profiles. We're not seeing it often, but it will happen more. So it's telling some of these recruiting tools that are essentially crawling the web, crawling LinkedIn in a primary place, to tell it, hey, qualify me if you find me, right? So it's pretty wild. And there's obviously ways around that. I also know, for another bit of context, through a contact, friend of a friend that who's an executive at LinkedIn that one of their primary strategic priorities right now is to protect their data and stop tools from crawling their pages. This is happening worse and worse and worse, both on a sales function and on a recruiting function. And so a lot of these outbound tools, from a recruiting side are getting in trouble. And now we have crawlers that are coming in to submit applications, right? So you could have one applicant, just to define the problem really well, you could have one applicant who is submitting themselves overnight to 5,000, 10,000 job posts. The reason this is such a problem for companies is because let's suppose that there's a couple of problems. You're going to get a lot of applicants, right? And this is where distro comes in, and that's really great. But you're going to have a lot of applicants, and you're going to have many that are not qualified. A super waste of time to even go into your ATS, click and open a resume, right? Then you're going to have the other problem, a candidate that does qualify, that is great. But now you're competing against at least 500 other recruiter responses that day to that candidate. You stand no chance, right? So it's a big problem, and I think we're going to see more and more of it. It's going to intensify. Is that a word? Yeah.
So at what point
over the next little bit of time, I think.
At what point, Chad, is it just my AI, my company's AI interviewing the candidate's AI? Like, I mean, it's kind of like this blog and SEO issue that we were talking about before, right? Like,
yeah. So this has been a topic of conversation for us internally, and our product manager is kind of I'm looking at it like, this is a great opportunity. It creates more need for us for people to use distro. And another person was thinking a little conversely, and they were like, no, this is a huge problem, right? Like, people could lie about their resume and prompt the AI. And I said to her, that's no different than it's always been. Lots of people make a fake resume, right? And that's always been an issue. But as far as AI interviewing AI, I think that requires a much more sophisticated person to make that happen, which is very rare. In Distro's case, there are tools already out to do an AI interview over the phone or just via audio. And, you can fool those a little bit better, but that's why we hold pretty strong to the video. The video allows us to take screen grabs and evaluate who's actually participating, right? And then also the length at which they're answering. So what you'll see sometimes people attempt, and we've seen this for sure, we've caught it. You'll see somebody who is doing like a technical interview and they get asked a technical answer, and they'll have AI listening, and then AI is responding. And then there's a delay by the time they're able to start reading the response from AI that they're supposed to deliver. And so we could also detect that as well. So there's certain ways to do it. I do think that we're pretty far away from AI trying to read AI. I mean, we'd have to really make the case that like you could have an individual candidate could use an AI agent to interview in its behalf. And I don't really see that.
Maybe if there's a candidate that could do that, maybe I do want them.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Honestly, it's interesting.
I feel like what all this is doing is pushing us towards more genuine human interaction, right? Like it becomes, if you look at the reason we choose to work, like to consume certain products, to work with certain people, it's all experiential. Like it's the user experience, right? And so I think it's going to matter a whole lot more who you know, right?
Bret,
not how you're manipulating the job search algorithm. It's going to be like, hey, how do you work your way into this organization to put you in a position where you're standing out from the rest of the candidates? Humans are lazy, and so most of us will take the shortest path from A to B. Like at Chief, we look for people who put in the extra effort, who stand out, who I just think it pushes the level of quality required to a different level.
That I totally agree with. So what we're seeing, so a job that you used to post and you'd get, just to put some data to this, a job in the US that you used to post and get like 80 candidates for, you're now getting like 300 to 350. Like that's happening across the board. That same job, if you were to post that, let's say in Latin America, you would get, before like 200, 250 candidates. Now you're getting as much as 1,000. So I totally agree. There's an interesting trend where it is even more important who you hire now. One, because you're hiring less people. We're trending to less headcount, higher revenue per employee. So it really, really matters who you hire. And it really matters the intelligence of the person you're hiring, because you need them also to work with the same intelligence that you use to get them hired. But one thing I was going to say, why I started to interrupt you, I apologize for that. But when you were talking, it reminded me just yesterday, we had a prospect that from a well-known mid-market company that said that there are several jobs that they're ghost posting in their ATS, which means it's not actually publishing to any job boards. They're tracking it in their ATS, but they're choosing several, much more than is normal. They're choosing to manually recruit for jobs because the posting is so unhelpful. Because there's just so many candidates to go through, and it takes days for one person to even just go through.
Is there going to be some concept? So like to Brett's point, I think one thing that's very similar, at least within our world, is when you fundraise and you want to get into a specific VC, you kind of have to do this like double opt-in. Like you reach out to someone who has to provide credibility. They're like, hey, cool. And then they introduce the VC, and the VC says, great. And then you meet. Ben Horowitz talks about how important that is, and it really shows, to your point, Brett, about work. Chad, is there like a concept of like a honeypot? Maybe you can do these like ghost posts to collect the automation, but then strip out, the person who's applied to 4 of the jobs. I feel like going back, like we do need an AI to combat this. It's like having nuclear weapons. Each side needs their own.
Yeah, okay. So that's another thing, right? This was literally part. So yesterday we did our quarterly planning, for Q3, and so this topic came up several times, and okay. So then we went back and checked our annual planning, which we did in December, and we looked at our SWOT analysis and checked what were the threats and concerns, and at the time, HR leaders in particular were very adverse to accepting this AI thing. They were very, very uncomfortable with it. They knew about it. They knew it was coming, but they were uncomfortable. There's like a real level of discomfort. What we're seeing now in just 6 months, we're seeing almost all prospects that are actively accepting meetings, actively accepting invitations to pilot the software, and already are getting budget to buy it. You're seeing this like very quick shift in fearful to now we need to join this or we're going to be in trouble. So I don't know if that totally answers the question, but like it's really it's crazy how quickly it's going.
Brandon, any final thoughts from you here?
Yeah, I mean, just that last comment by Chad, made me think about my market. I mean, the market that we sell into is traditionally slower to adopt tech. I was talking to a marketing agency within the industry, and they're like, yeah, we're dragging them into the 90s kicking and screaming when it comes to tech, right? Like, so definitely slower. And I've wondered how AI adoption is going to play out there. But hearing what Chad's saying, like, it's not, I don't think about hiring necessarily, but what I'm thinking about is, man, even the markets that are slow to adopt tech traditionally, like everything's just speeding up, and like they're going to be pretty quick to adopt some of this tech, especially if you can solve a major problem for them with AI better than without it.
All right, Brett, sorry. Last topic, last comment rather.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking a lot about this as it relates to pricing. And I think that like more and more, I mean, when we were running his like traditional SaaS businesses, like, yeah, license our software and there's all these promises we can make to deliver value. This brings, I think this highlights more and more, what is the value? What's the job that's getting done? What would I have paid a human to do this? And before, our technology wasn't doing the work. It was capturing the work and automating some of the results in certain cases. In this case, it's like last night I was building out automations using Clay, and I had to up the tokens, and I'm like, yeah, I'm paying for more tokens because the value I'm getting, the work that's being done from this warrants it. And so I just think it, like, as we each look at our products, what's the job that's getting done? Not what job are we facilitating? Like, now it can do the job. And so I just think it's a whole different paradigm that if you're not staying up to speed, you're going to get left behind really quickly, which is terrifying, right? Like, as you're looking to transition your business model or the value that the business brings. So
I think it's hilarious too that, we're all roughly 40 and tokens have now come back. When we're kids, you go to the arcade, you get your tokens, and now we're talking about getting more.
I'm 28 for the record, just so you know.
you definitely don't look 28, but
Oh.
All right, folks, we'll leave it there. Thanks to Bret, Chad, and Brandon for jumping in and scaring a few SaaS founders along the way. We'll be back next week, same time, same questionable takes on Cereal for Lunch.